You know, maybe even if she couldn't vote, could she still listen if she was at home?
Yeah, you wouldn't count her as in attendance even. It's just,
Right,
she could just, I would say, just not even turn your screen on, just listen.
yeah. Well, it doesn't look like she's there, which is unfortunate, because it's important. I know a lot of people have questions, including Sandy, so. All
Mhm.
right, well, I'll go ahead and call the 10 o'clock meeting to order at 10:06. Any public comment? There is no public here. All right. So the new business is the first item. We're here for discussion of the Leone treatment plant and Sylvan's obligations. So we have a memo, the second version memo from Mr. Thal. It came today.
Yeah, if you could take a look at it, read it through, and then there's a motion at the end to go into closed session.
Yeah, there's really no public here, so do we still need to go into closed session?
Well, I would say so because I don't, otherwise this is being recorded
In the, yeah, the minutes.
and somebody could FOIA the recording.
Oh, and the minutes, good point.
Mhm.
I've had a chance to read through the letter. I had a couple of comments on it, but we can discuss that in closed session.
Mm-hmm.
And Rob, I know Kurt had a question when he came in that Bob Skull was equipped to answer. And I wondered if we went into closed session, would we be able to invite Bob Skull in if we wanted?
I think it's a good idea to do that. Yes, we can invite in, our staff and agents. So I think that's a good idea if he's available.
Yeah, he said he would be.
Is this truly, will we truly get $1 million in taps from phase 2 of something?
Yeah, let's see, how many
It's,
homes?
5 for water, 5 for sewer, so it's 10,000 per connection.
And there's 100 new,
Oh,
So
yeah,
if you put in-
140 maybe new homes.
okay.
We'd be out of the 4.4 million. Couple weeks.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear yours. That's okay. Okay,
It's not a big deal.
let's see. Okay, I got it.
Right, it's not a long one. All right, has everybody had a chance to review that?
Yes.
I will move that the Township Board convene in closed session under Section 8(1)H of the Open Meetings Act to consider material exempt from disclosure by state statute, Section 13, subsection 1, subsection G of the Freedom of Information Act, being a letter from its attorney dated October 19th, 2022, for the reason that the letter is exempt from disclosure under state law due to the attorney-client privilege. And at this point, what I say, the board is also inviting DPW Administrator Bob Skull into the closed session.
That's fine.
Second?
Okay, roll call vote. Rod?
Yes.
Kathy, yes? Kurt?
Yes.
Amanda?
Yes.
All right, and Sandy is absent, so motion carries. All right, seeing there's nobody here, we have the doors closed, so just, are they locked? Okay, perfect, closed and locked.
Yep.
Well, I know you had to do that. The closed session was just that figure of speech.
Take it seriously. Okay, so, you know, this situation with, you know, Leone, Rob Falls laid out really nicely here, and he's had communication with Sun Crossing, Sylvan Crossing and Sun Communities. And I know, I'm hearing from the developers, from Danny Berry and Jack Knowles, and Sean LaFear, who are also wondering what the status is, and sort of Jack Knowles is, wondering why we aren't moving more in a legal fashion. And I've talked a little bit about that with Rob, and one of the things that he had said, or maybe he can just address the length of time in the circuit court and what,
Yeah, I mean, if you want, so, you know, as everybody knows, the system, the treatment plant is under a moratorium from Eagle not to accept new flow. And part of the, you know, some of the issues, which, you know, I don't know that Leone was really forthcoming early on, at least, you know, in terms of what the issues were with Eagle, but it sounds like, and I actually then had a meeting probably within the last month with Leone Township's attorney and Sun Communities attorneys. But, you know, and from that, it appears that, you know, Eagle was basically saying that they didn't have enough capacity, that the plant had to be upgraded. They hadn't done things that they should have been doing over time. But one of the big things is there's a lagoon, an overflow lagoon that they use. And Eagle wants them to, does want them to shut it down, but they can't shut it down because they use it for overflow when there's big rain events. And Eagle is telling them that he had to shut it down, but they actually came, and I don't think Eagle was aware, but Leone actually has a permit, an old permit for use of that lagoon. So I don't know where that goes, but that was part of their consent agreement that they were asking Leone to sign off on, was to shut down that lagoon, which they can't really do. And then also agree to higher fines if they violate anything moving forward, which I don't know that they have a right to do that either. There's fines set up by statute or by regulation. So I don't know that there's any way that that consent agreement is going to get approved. One of the reasons we met with them, with the developers for Sun, was if it was just a financial matter, that maybe the developers would kick in some money to help pay, you know, whatever the financial issue was for the Leone system. But it's more than just financial, it's the use of that lagoon. And part of the problem is that they have a big problem with inflow and infiltration of stormwater. So when we have these rain events, and they're having a much more higher rate of volume coming in, And they really can't handle that volume level, and that's why I think one of the main reasons Eagle is going after them. But I don't know that they're aware that, and I talked to Bob later about this, that we do have meters on our system. So we know whether we have water infiltration issues. And we have our system is relatively newer, and we don't have that problem. So the infiltration of water, stormwater into the system isn't coming from us. And so when Leone's looking at moving forward and allowing people to connect, that's going to be an issue that they're going to want to see addressed by those other municipalities that want to send new flow, is, how they're controlling infiltration of stormwater. And that might require them to install flow meters on other parts of the system, but we're really okay from that standpoint, it sounds like. And so I would hope that when it's ready, the plant should be, they're doing improvements on the plant. It should be able to handle 25% more flow. And, if we don't have a water infiltration problem, then I see no reason why they wouldn't begin to accept new flow from us, as of April 2023, when they said they're going to finish. Now, we don't know that it's for sure April 2023. It could be a month earlier, it could be months later. It's hard to say, but they think that they are on schedule. When we were talking to their attorney to start with, he was like, "Oh, this project won't be done for 2 more years." And the developer's jaws just dropped to the floor. I mean, it was pretty tense. So we got the engineering firm for Leone on the phone, and they actually cleared that up. And it's like, no, the upgrades will be done they're anticipating by April of next year. So that quelled some of that issue. But, with Sun is buying and I don't know if they're still buying, but they were buying the mobile home park, Sylvan Crossing, from Four Leaf. Four Leaf had indicated to them that everything was fine and they could move forward with the new phase. But obviously we can't send flow through, so they can't fully sell out and hook up their new phase. And so they have some internal issues to work out between Sun Communities and Sylvan and Four Leaf. They wanted us to sign an agreement that they would pay us, $1 million plus for all the tap fees. But in the agreement, they're trying to get us to kind of guarantee the flow, which we can't do. We can say, we'll allow you to construct, we'll allow you to put in your units, but you can't connect unless you have a permit from Eagle, which I believe they do have a permit from Eagle, but their permit from Eagle says that Leone has to agree to accept the flow, which Leone won't say that in writing because they'll probably get sued by Eagle if they do that, because they violate the moratorium. Leone did say that they might, how would they even know? But I don't, that's not a good way to be doing things. Like, they'll just turn a blind eye to it. I think that creates other liability issues if Leone won't put it in writing, but they'll still accept it. For how long and what happens if Eagle comes down on it or finds out, that's not a position we want to be put in. But really, it's not our, we from a zoning standpoint say, you've gone through the process, you can build it, they could go get their building permit, but what's going to hold them up is Eagle is actually holding them up with their permits, or Leone, in the case of Sun, not signing off that they'll accept the flow. So those things are really kind of out of our hand. I mean, we may get threatened with suit, but Judge, what can we do? You can't make us do anything, because we've done everything we can do. Everything else, when it gets down to suit, it's really, do you sue Eagle over the moratorium? Do you sue Leone to take the flow, which they would just come back and say, well, we're under a moratorium from Eagle, we can't. So it really comes down to, is it an issue where you'd sue Eagle over it. And with all these, we start filing suits, in circuit court, normally a lawsuit takes about a year to go through circuit court. And if we're looking at April for the plant to be up and running and should be accepting flow, I mean, it's just spinning our wheels, getting nowhere. So I'm not really sure, the developers may be looking for us to do something or put pressure. I mean, we've been trying to figure out what can be done. But in terms of threatening to file suit, I don't know, so if we threaten to file suit against Leone, what are they going to say? They're going to say, we can't accept it. We're under a moratorium. So I don't know, it would be a matter of maybe having to threaten to sue Eagle, but if they've got a basis for saying these upgrades have to occur before new flow, then, you're spinning your wheels there. So it's just kind of an overview, and I can take some questions if you want. And then I also did add at the end of our memo something about connection fees, so that if we want to talk about connection fees, I know Kurt raised an issue about that. I mean, it's a separate issue, but we can still talk about it because it's part of my attorney-client memo.
So I had a couple of things. When we talk about new flow, I'm thinking Cassidy Lake Correctional Institution was shut down, and that was over 200 REUs that disappeared. So, my question would be, well, why can't we use those 200 some REUs and give them to, the developers and say, okay, we're not gonna send any additional flow to
Right.
Leone, but we're gonna keep the REU number the same.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that we could explore. I don't know, Kathy, if that issue's ever come up in your discussions with Eagle or not.
Nope, it has not.
Because we wouldn't be increasing the flow. It's the same. A lot of it just, again, comes down to, if they need a permit from Eagle, will Eagle sign off on that basis? And then, Leone would accept the flow if Eagle would sign off, I'm sure. And then, otherwise, I don't know that Leone would sign off on it, even though we'd be under, it's an exchange of just where we're at. So, I mean, it's certainly something I think that's worth exploring. Probably we'd have to start with Eagle to see what their opinion on that would be, is if, we're not sending through more flow, will they still honor however many REUs we're sending through, when they did the moratorium? So that is it is something that we could go back and check on.
So, and then I'm confused, it seems like Leone meets with Eagle and Sylvan Township can't be part of that meeting, and the Regional Utility Authority we talked about earlier is not privy to those. I don't understand why we can't be involved in those meetings. I mean, we're all in this boat together. So, why aren't we all sitting in these meetings together?
I don't know why Leone has not included us in those discussions previously. I do have access to their attorney, who was helpful in, disclosing things that are going on. We have had, I think Kathy has had meetings with Eagle.
Yeah, we've
And you
had
invited
meetings with-
Leone and they didn't show.
Yeah, right, Mr. Lindenberry did not come to that meeting. So,
Yeah, and I don't know, why they didn't show, but
You had the meeting here.
it
Or
was
it
a
was a
Zoom
Zoom.
meeting, yep, it was a Zoom meeting, the developers and representatives from Eagle were there, and so it was fruitful in that the developers could hear from Eagle directly, but Howard didn't show, so. Yeah.
But yeah, if we have 200 more REUs, maybe, Eagle wouldn't give us an exception for what's under construction or anything, really. But maybe they would say that we could still use that 200 RU, unused RUs.
So which developments could use those then? Could use,
Well, that, we would have to prioritize the developments, and would we need Linden to agree to that, because what they're,
Because-
does it not matter?
because, if the state turned around and wanted to use that facility, and for some reason Leone didn't have their plan up to
Just-
speed, then what happens?
Just a side note, I got a call last week from a contractor working on a bid for the state to disconnect the prison from the sewer system.
Okay.
So that's in the works now.
Okay.
There's no turning back on that.
Yeah, if they're doing that, there's no intent for them to use that.
Use the facility.
Because I've had prisons shut down before, but they still paid their sewer fees and stayed connected. And then, like, I've had even like 5 years later, they, started putting prisoners back in there. But if they're disconnecting it, then, that's an indication that they're not gonna restart.
It sounds like Eagle is sort of the bad guy in this game, at least when you talk to Leone. Leone says that Eagle is changing the game on them constantly.
Mm-hmm.
They're not very flexible. So that makes me think, well, Eagle is, it's a political organization. So, do we start running it up the flagpole politically? You've got, how many thousands of people connected to this Leone system? What is it, 10,000 some REUs? If you look at all the people hooked up, I think the senators would be very interested in hearing that Eagle is being unrealistic. I don't know if it makes sense to apply pressure on Eagle through that route.
I kind of do think that that's probably one of the only courses of action that might make sense, is to try to apply political pressure through your reps.
We talked about that last time.
To go after Eagle a little bit, about impress them, especially like, okay, so we're 200 RUs down. Why can't we use those 200 RUs? I mean, we have developers. I mean, Michigan is, very much pro-development. We have developers waiting to go with their projects that are just being held up. And for really no reason, if we have available REUs and we can't use them. And, so I think, the developers could also approach the reps too about putting some pressure on, because, they're just losing money. And we know we need more housing for people throughout the state. And, like Chelsea Square, we've got apartments, that could be being constructed and, having a place for people to live in apartments. And we can't do it for what appears almost arbitrary restriction by Eagle, that they won't bend, they won't do any type of, relaxation for specific purposes of their moratorium, which doesn't really make sense.
Right.
Especially if we know that we're not a priority that has a problem with water infiltration and inflow.
Well, I'm not sure about that. The only way you can really pinpoint where the problem with I&I is to put in the metering, which doesn't exist, and that's why the Regional Utility Authority is looking at metering projects. Where would it make most sense? Where are they going to get the biggest bang for their buck to install metering?
But we have flow, but my understanding is Sylvan has a flow meter.
Well, we have, I would call them, there are some sub-meters, so.
Well, Bob's here, he can address that.
We do have flow meters on all our major stations. In the past, I'd put together reports for the state and for you guys for showing the flow versus precipitation. 90% of our system's under pressure, so we're not getting infiltration. The only place we could get infiltration from is really the trailer park, because so low, the demand, the whole place floods.
For my grinder pump system, it sits in the ground, and when it rains, the rainwater runs into that well, and then it goes into the pressure system. So just because it's a pressure system doesn't mean that you don't have I&I.
Well, you're gonna get some I&I, but the fact is we're monitoring that flow, and we can prove that the flow through these stations correlating with rainfall, there's not a significant increase. Whatever, there may be some trickling in and nothing's perfect.
Right.
Yeah,
But
so that's why
it's
the
not
metering,
significant.
the metering that they're looking at installing, they're not looking at Sylvan Township for that.
Right, that's right.
You know, they're looking for that southern region interceptor, they're looking in those areas.
The only place I could see that would work against us is, and that's more of a sewer authority question than Sylvan Township, is that we do not have a flow meter at Michigan Ave Station, which is the last station. It just picks up whatever Grass Lake is contributing, but we don't have a flow meter there. But that has nothing to do with Sylvan Township as a whole is fine. It's that we can't monitor what Grass Lake is contributing to our interceptor.
Mm-hmm.
What Grass Lake is.
Yes.
And where is that then? Where is it? I'm trying to.
It runs, where's
The
the?
Kilmer Road station, is that where
The
Grass
Kilmer
Lake
Road,
is?
and
Kilmer
then
Road.
there's Mount Hope,
Okay.
or Night Road, it's called different thing, everything has two names. Then there's the Michigan Ave Station, which is the last one right before it goes into Leone.
Okay.
So instead of the developers suing us, we should be teaming up with the developers, because Sylvan Township is being hurt by this also. We're not getting tap fees that we should be getting. That's
Tap
cash
fees,
that's not coming
tax
in.
revenue.
Tax,
Yeah, right.
That's being, so
Right.
we're a partner in this with the developers.
That's been my stance when I've been working with them, is really, you trying to be an ally to them and, working through Eagle. They did ask, okay, so they say Eagle says April 2023. I think it was Sean LaFear said, what about, could they see any other delays? And so I asked Tiffany Myers from Eagle, she said, yes, April 2023, any further questions need to go to Leone. Our people, our Part 41 inspector will need to go and inspect and issue those permits after the plant is ready, so everyone will need to be patient. And I asked if we could expedite that work, because we've been patient for a really long time. And she said it would depend on what the work matter was, the workload was at the time, but they would try to prioritize that work. But that's not feeling great either, to say, okay, the plant's done in April, but how long is it gonna take your Part 41 person to actually issue those permits? And I think these are the delays that the developers are worried about, right? It's like April 2023, okay, maybe we can wait that long, but there's.
Yeah, that's where probably, we could put some pressure, maybe, political pressure on Eagle, because that's fairly arbitrary on their part to just say, well, we'll get around to it and take, hey, maybe they should be getting ready now,
Right,
for this, and prioritize it on, so it's as soon as possible, not as we get to it, we'll deal with it, and,
right.
just kind of bureaucratic nonsense. Somebody needs to put some pressure on them
Yeah.
to, on April, as soon as it's ready, April 2023, they have this as a priority thing, and, everything is expedited.
Right.
But that, if we can't get anything from Eagle on that, I think that's where you go and put political pressure on them to
Well,
be
and
like,
that's-
hey, you're costing our constituents money, you're costing the municipalities money. They could be having tax revenue, they could have places for people to live. Developers are losing money, and you just can't be lackadaisical about it.
Right. And then, of course, we're in election season, so I know, Rob, last time we talked about this idea of political pressure and, people aren't running again, we're gonna have new people in 3 weeks, but maybe just kind of hitting everybody. And I think Rob said, like, just saying, this is something that you should be aware of, that you would be coming into, should you be elected. Because I thought about going to Donna Lisinski, but she's gonna be out in 3 weeks, so how much, clout is she gonna really carry going into somebody's office? And
Right.
so anyway, there is that part too. It's not.
Well, they'll be in lame duck for a while.
Yeah,
So, I mean, they could still do that. And maybe we go to the developers and say, hey, let's set up a meeting with the developers and us to meet with our representatives,
okay.
I
and
like that idea, but we gotta have specific, written down issues.
right, yeah, have talking points for them. But I think that's a good, because a lot of it is just, Eagle and how they're choosing to operate.
And I will say, I feel like there are those at Eagle who have been more receptive and those at Eagle who are more, straight to the no, I feel like, we've had meetings with these different people. So I feel like the person I've been communicating with was maybe who was a little more staunch and, in her guidelines and interpretations. I think this guy Charlie Hill was on some of our meetings at one point, and he seemed really more understanding and compassionate. So I don't know, maybe it's a matter of, inviting the right people.
Right, well, they'll go to the top of the food chain, the representatives will.
Yeah, right.
Because we really don't know what the issues are between Eagle and Leone. I mean, they won't share that with us.
Well, they haven't shared the agreement because we're not a party to the agreement is what, and we did come to the agreement through other ways. But originally when I requested it, they said no.
Meaning we don't know what has to be updated on the system
Not
specifically?
officially.
Right.
Not officially.
I haven't seen anything in writing that says you don't have a permit for your lagoon, or you got 5 processing streams and 3 of them are out for repair. And I haven't seen anything from Eagle, what Eagle's complaints are. Is I one of Eagle's complaints? And if so, what are the tolerances for I, and what, how fast can we get metering installed to figure out where the I issue is coming from?
I don't see how they're even gonna operate that plant without an equalization tank or using that basin to equalize the flow, because these membranes, they're either on or they're off. I mean, so you have to have a way of regulating the flow through them. So when you have rain periods, you have to be able to store the water somewhere to maintain a constant flow. It's the only way the system works.
Yeah, they have to use that lagoon. And, Eagle came in telling them they had to shut it, that it wasn't authorized, but Eagle didn't even realize that they had issued a permit for that lagoon, I think.
Does it make sense to you that we have been excluded from that their story of we aren't a party to that, therefore we don't get to,
Well, I mean, they don't have to include us in anything.
yeah,
I mean, that's not, I mean, I'd like to think that they would be more open with things. Are they concerned that maybe we would sue them for not properly maintaining their facility? Maybe. I mean, they've accepted rates and should have been keeping their system upgraded.
well, certainly Leone, I mean, when I've talked to Howard, he knows that's a possibility, he's right up front with that, and they know the spot they're in. So they're not sharing it, and Eagle's not sharing it, but neither one of them are obligated to.
But, well, I think Eagle, it's probably public record. I can't imagine that Eagle can do it not subject. I mean, maybe we should be making a FOIA for Eagle records.
That'll generate some paperwork.
But I think one other thing I was thinking about too is, and I've done this in other places, so Eagle won't even allow them to start construction, but I think they won't allow them to start construction of the sewer lines.
Right,
You know, could we allow them to start, and this is on the developer, whether to take this risk or not. But would they want to start building their structures outside of the infrastructure so they could get started, and then when the time comes, they could then install the utility infrastructure? I don't know if that's a possibility, but I've had that in other projects. I just had that in another project where they have to put in a public water system on their site, and they don't have approval from Eagle yet, but we let them start construction anyway with an agreement that they will agree to indemnify us, for anything that, if Eagle comes back and says they can't do it, we're not liable for allowing them to start construction. But, maybe that's something to go back to the developers with too, is like, well, if we're indemnified from liability, we could say, hey, and there's no guarantee of what Eagle will allow. We can't say that. But if you wanted to start construction at your own risk, you could start construction, pouring foundations and doing other things at your own risk. And then once you get your proper permits from the state, then you could build your utility infrastructure. I don't know if that's even a possibility, but I know in other projects it's been done.
well, and that makes me think about, I think, and this is another thing I would like to talk about at some point, maybe not today, but Westchester looks like they're moving forward with phase 4. I know Sue Dickinson had some comments, and, so that just makes me think about that scenario. I don't know if they're kind of
We
doing
need-
that, but,
Well, one thing we need to make sure they're all aware that there's a current moratorium. Because that's the only,
they're all aware.
right, I mean, that's the only potential liability on our part would be, oh, you never informed us. I don't know that we have to, but we
Right.
should if we know and they don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, all of those developers have been in the meetings on Eagle with us.
I mean, it's part of their process. They have to get permits from Eagle.
Right,
We don't handle that part of it.
right, and yeah. Yeah, and when I talked to Danny Very, he admits that he didn't read his permit very well, and so he went ahead and put things in, and, so anyway, it's,
Mhm.
yeah.
So really, I think the best thing at this point would be, probably doing some political pressure on Eagle to the extent we can. To number one, if there's any exception they can make, because we are under our, we're not sending 200 RUs through because the prison shut down. Can we use those other 200 RUs? I don't see why we shouldn't be able to.
We need Leone's, anything from Leone, because those are Leone's REUs right now. I mean, would it,
Or Linden.
I mean, that's what I meant, Linden Townships.
Linden, yeah, I mean, we may have to bring Linden in.
Yeah, I don't think they have any intention for it, and I think they would say fine, fine. for
Right.
that, but just wanted to throw that out there.
But then also, if we have to wait till April for them to, construct their sewer systems and hook up, then we need some kind of commitment from Eagle that this can be done like expedited and right away. Not, we'll get to it.
Depends on what the workload is,
Yeah, no, this needs to be the workload.
right? Yes.
Does Sylvan have a contract with Leone?
Yeah, Sylvan has so we have a sewer agreement that hit between Grass Lake, Leone, Sylvan, and the regional authority.
So is anybody out of compliance with the contract?
Well, I think, well, sure, they say, I mean, to some degree, yes, because it says they'll accept 1.2 million gallons per day from us. But it's also an impossibility if you're under a moratorium from Eagle.
But that's not our problem, that's Leone's. I mean, if you're in breach of contract, you're in breach of contract.
Yeah, but if you go to court, they're just gonna say we're under a moratorium. I mean, ultimately, yeah, could there be, if we get sued, we'd have to turn around and sue them. But, you know, if we were to sue them, I don't think we're getting anywhere because they're just gonna say we're under a moratorium. The judge is gonna say, what do you want them to do?
Well, I'm just looking at how do we minimize the risk of us being sued by developers. We need to become partners with them.
Yeah, I think working with them is the best way. You know, we've had good discussions with them, but I think we need to keep up those discussions so that they know we're working with them for a common cause.
So you either
That's why maybe getting a group together to meet with, you know, your reps would be a positive thing of, you know, of being on the same team with the developers.
So if I'm a developer, I'd be sitting back and saying, well, wait a sec, there was a breach of contract and you township did nothing about it.
Well, I don't think that there's anything that we can do about it.
And I think, when I think about it, I think, what would we ask for? We really want the flow. They're unable to do that. Otherwise, what are our damages, I guess? Are we asking for money? Are we asking for?
We don't have any
What we
damages
want
unless we're
is-
sued.
What's that?
We wouldn't have any damages unless the developer sued us.
So that's just what I'm wondering, is if we could tell the developers, well, I understand that, but also, like, what would we sue for? If ultimately what we want is that flow, they can't give it, like you're saying, if we went to court,
But I don't think we're in breach with the developers because developers have to get their permits from Eagle. I mean, we've done everything we are supposed to do.
right,
There's a part of it that's always out of our hand, which is they got to get permits from Eagle. Or if they have permits from Eagle, like I think Danny Berry has a permit from Eagle, but it says that Leone has to accept the flow. So I mean, if you sued anybody, you should sue Leone to accept the flow. But we've done pretty much, we have an agreement. The flow is allowed to go. If the other parties aren't honoring that, you know, it's either Eagle not giving a permit, which not in our control, or Leone not accepting the flow because they're under a moratorium from Eagle. I really don't see, you know, where it doesn't mean we couldn't be sued. We can always be sued. But I think we have a pretty solid defense from the standpoint that we've done everything we can do. It's Eagle who's not giving them their permit, or Leone who's not saying they'll accept the flow. I don't think our agreement requires us to order Leone to accept the flow. It's that, you know, we have the ability to have that much flow, but, you know, if Leone's just going to come back and say Eagle won't let us. Now, do they have damages? Maybe. You know, if we were sued and we turn around and sue Leone, you know, Leone might have financial, and maybe that's why they don't want to be upfront with us, because they have potential liability that they've guaranteed to us a certain amount of flow. They've screwed up, didn't keep their plant up to date, and now they're potentially liable.
I will say, last time I talked to Danny Berry, he seemed very understanding. He had gone to the Leone Township meeting. I think it was the same night we had a board meeting here. And he told me, if what Howard's saying is true about this lagoon, he said, I don't blame Leone for not signing that agreement. I wouldn't sign it either. And then he said, you know, okay, so if I have to wait, you know, if we're gonna wait till April, then these other sets of concerns. Are we really gonna be able to move in April? He was concerned about having developed things that would be assessed with a non-homestead, and then in the future, I told him he can talk to Catherine about that. But I just wanna say, at least for him, I had a really positive conversation. I feel like all of the conversations with the developer's been positive, but I really got the feeling he saw this issue, saw that we were in a catch-22 position too. And so it felt positive that he was saying, okay, I understand, you know, if we do wait till April, then these other things. So I just want to let people know that, at least with him, I feel like, you know, it's a positive thing that he's not misunderstanding or chomping at the bit for us to do something that, you know.
I think the bigger problem or the bigger issue is with Sun Communities buying Sylvan Crossing. If that deal falls apart, you know, you're gonna have a very angry Four Leaf.
Yes. You know, I
And
mentioned, no, go ahead.
so, no, I was just gonna say, that's where I see like, you know, people coming out swinging.
I mentioned this to Carol one day, and she said as soon as she got, or we received that information, she said, I'm pretty sure I emailed it to everybody. So she was gonna look in her email to see, because if that was disclosed immediately to Four Leaf, I don't, maybe that.
Yeah, it's kind of on them if they didn't tell Sun.
Right, and I remember, do you remember, we got like I can't remember what it was called, it started with an A, I feel like, but it was from Four Leaf, and they were asking us questions, and I remember said, you don't have to, it wasn't something we had to answer, and so we didn't. And they were asking questions about, I don't know.
Yeah, zoning, I think.
Yeah, something like that, yeah, zoning.
I kind of think that's what it was, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, they have to do their own due diligence,
Right.
but
I don't wanna be found,
that's why I do think maybe a good way moving forward it would be with, you know, trying to get a group together to meet with your local reps. And then having, you know, and seeing if they'll go to Eagle and line this up for us. So we can have some assurance, you know, if these guys gotta wait and sit on their projects until April, that, you know, this is gonna be expedited for them.
yeah.
And I don't think that's unreasonable, really. And then again, you know, is there the option for allowing them to construct? You know, having the building authority give them a permit to start construction with the understanding that there's no guarantees. You know, and if there's some liability because they get it constructed and then Eagle doesn't approve their permits, that's on them.
And you would draw up a document or whatever.
Right.
You would, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we started to do something like that with Sun, allowing them to do their peerings.
Yep.
Now, and, you know, I told them, you know, we gotta have indemnity. And they really, you know, they kind of got mad in between, I think, between them and Four Leaf of why should we be doing this, et cetera, et cetera. But I mean, I'm not gonna give somebody permission to do it if, you know, they're not accepting the responsibility of the fact that even though we're saying, yeah, go ahead and build, that if they don't get their approvals, we're not liable for that. Because then they've dumped millions and millions of dollars into a development. And you know what, if they lose out, I don't want them coming back looking at us.
Right.
So can we put together some kind of document that tells the developers what our plan is? You know, that hey, we're in the same boat with you guys, we're hurting because we're not getting these tap fees, and here's what we think we should be doing, and then we can sit down with the developers and see what ideas they have and see if they agree, and then set up a meeting with representatives and the whole time keep Leone informed of what we're doing.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Because I just see there's just a lot of lack of communication out there. We don't know what Eagle is doing with Leone, and Leone is not telling us things, they're not showing up to meetings. And, you know, it's time for everybody to come together and put it all out there and, you know, list what are the action items that need to be completed, who's gonna do it, and when's it gonna be done by, so that we can move on with life. We're just kinda trusting that Leone is doing the right thing. It doesn't seem to be
Yeah.
working for us.
Well, I don't think we're in a, yeah, I mean, we're not in a great spot, but I feel like communication with the developers, like on our end, has been good. I feel like Rob finally has, hopefully, the story about the consent order, which we weren't privy to, about that it's more than just financial things. So I think now we're in a much more illuminated space than we were, say, 6 months ago. So, but definitely, I mean, getting people together and being in an agreement, I know the developers will say yes to whatever we wanna do to move this forward. They're not, you know. So, yeah,
They may even have additional thoughts and ideas, things that, you know, I'd like to know from the developers, what is it that they think we should be doing?
Mhm.
And are those things we
Right.
can possibly do,
right,
so they
Well-
can't come back in 6 months and say, well, you should have been doing this, and you didn't.
yeah. Well, the one thing I've heard so far is suing, so, you know, we have, an answer to that, but yeah, what, outside of that, what else could we do? And these are the things that
Right,
we're
could-
thinking of doing,
could
right?
we-
Yeah, and if we sue Eagle, that's such a protracted battle. You know, you gotta get it's a huge endeavor and very expensive to sue Eagle. Cause we'd have to do all sorts of discovery, you know, and get into why they did it. Is it right, what they've done? You know, there's a lot that would go into that type of litigation.
But I think a meeting where we bring everybody together, the developers together, would feel, you know, would
Yeah.
feel good, because and then maybe the developers can agree on some things, you know,
Right, well, and
understanding
we've,
that.
yeah, and we've
that-
had those meetings, we can have more of them, you know, we've had all the
That's what you were
developers
talking about, where
together,
Leone
so
didn't
we've
show
done
up.
that. Yeah, and we've done that, and we've even had some since then, and I'm happy to do again, and this is great that we're all coming together. I just don't want, because we can't have a quorum on these calls, and because, you know, maybe I put in the supervisor's report that I met with developers, I just want the board to know, even though you're not right there and hearing it, that I'm continuing to have conversations and really smoothing ruffled feathers with these developers to keep everybody, you know, as cool and calm as we can. So I just don't want the message to be out there that communication's falling apart, because I don't know that that's true. I think there's been some gaps in communication and things we can't control, such as Leone,
Right.
such as Eagle.
I think those are the
So
biggest
I think,
gaps.
right.
Yeah.
So, you know, we can all come together. Now, who would come to those meetings? Obviously, we can't have a quorum. I can be there, Kurt wants to be there, or if you'd like to be
But could we have
there.
a quorum if we make it a public meeting?
If we have a public meeting, we could have a quorum.
Because maybe that would be a new venue to discuss this with.
Well,
Well, it can be a work
and I
session.
think, yeah, it can be a work session. I mean, but it's all, whatever you call it, it's an open meeting, and
Right.
it's open to the public.
Sure.
It has public
Which I
comment
think
and
that's
minutes and
great.
stuff like that too, so.
Yeah.
If we wanna formalize that, you know, that would be fine. Also, I'm happy to just kinda continue to have, you know, me and another board member in with the developers. Because also when we have 15 people or 10 people's schedules we have to coordinate, that's a little harder than, say, 5 or 6 people to coordinate. But I'm not an exclusionary person, I don't wanna leave anybody out, and if the all board feels like it's best to do this in an open session, and Rob feels good about that too, I'm willing to do whatever.
Yeah, typically, you know, I think we're gonna wanna be talking strategy with the developers. And I don't, you know, typically you're not gonna wanna talk about strategy in a public meeting. Things that might end up in newspapers or media, especially if we're talking about, hey, let's exert pressure, let's do, you know, try to, you know, manipulate something. That's probably not, you know, it's strategy and how we go about doing that. I don't know that you'd want to have that in a public forum. Certainly, the board could be updated as things progress. You know, that's not an OMA. You know, I can provide an attorney-client privilege update as these things occur, so that all board members would be informed of what's going on.
Perfect.
So are you going to provide us a legal opinion on whether we should be suing Eagle and whether we should be suing Leone for breach of contract? And then is that something we should share with developers?
I think we should, I think the better course right now would be to put together issues for discussion with the developers, and that we would move forward with, say, our representatives, and then try to get a meeting with the developers to talk about what this is a avenue that we think that we could approach, to put pressure on Eagle to make sure that that April 2023 date, isn't, that it is taken seriously, and that their permits are processed in an expedited fashion. I mean, I would leave it to those discussions to see if then people are saying, oh, trying to put liability back on us. I have not heard, in my discussions with them, I have not heard them say that. But, I would just go with them to an approach. That's the approach to go with at this point. Again, I don't think it makes any sense to go after Eagle at this point. I mean, I would only do that if we did get sued, or go after Leone only if we did get sued, because otherwise we're just incurring a lot of expense. That if we can get consensus developers to do a different process, such as putting political pressure on, and maybe that political pressure could do something before April. I don't know. I mean, but I think that if we get them to kind of go along with that kind of keeps their focus on how do we get moving forward, rather than just tie it up in litigation. Everybody's claiming damages, and you're not building anything.
Okay, thank you.
So I think the first step would be to kind of, let's get the issues together for discussion with developers and with our reps, then have a meeting with the developers to discuss strategy, and then implement it.
And what should we be doing with Eagle? I mean, I'd like to see their list of concerns. Like I say, I'm used to, you got a project, you list, what it is, what it's gonna cost, how long it takes, who's responsible. You got 10 things on that list, or you got one?
Right.
I have no idea. There's no communication coming from Leone saying, here are the issues with Eagle. So, why is that being so guarded?
Right. Yeah, I guess we could go to Eagle, straight to Eagle for that.
I
Like,
have asked Eagle if you're talking about what's on the consent order.
Just what are their
well, what's the basis of the moratorium? Really, in my opinion, like, what's the basis of the moratorium? What are they doing to remedy that? And is it this April, construction? But it sounds to me like you have talked to Eagle enough that that they believe by April they'll be in a position to start to process permits.
Yes, yep, that's what Tiffany Myers just emailed me the other day.
Because what typically happens if you don't have these things listed and you're not tracking them, April 23rd comes along, and then, there's still a couple of issues, and then it drags out another 3-4 months,
Right, and they already have waited
it's
a long
to get
time.
it in writing and
Well, and wouldn't those things, and again, I mean, we're not privy to that, so it'd be good to ask if they can give it to something that they can give us, but would those things be listed in that consent order?
The basis of moratorium, as you referred to it. It seems like they should be
Okay,
able
so
to
the
provide
basis of
you.
moratorium, yeah, and then the list of things that they're requiring Leone to do would be in that agreement, right?
I mean, I suppose, I mean, this should all be subject to FOIA. I mean, we could FOIA them.
So we got a copy of the agreement that Eagle was requesting Leone sign. I think, were you at Midwest Consulting that day? We were at a meeting and, I said I had asked for it and we couldn't get it, and one of the developers there said, I actually received it in a stack of documents somebody sent me from Eagle. I think it was a mistake, but he disseminated it to everybody who was in the room, so
They put
we
in
have
the
it.
agenda packet, I think.
They put it in
Yeah,
an
they go
agenda
from the
packet.
agenda packet,
So we
yeah.
have it, some of the developers have it. So I think, that, and I can share that with you guys too. We're not technically supposed to have it, but that's how we came to it. And so I feel like that would have the list of things that Leone needs to correct, and like a checkable list, right?
Mhm.
This is what they're requiring them to do. So, we can ask for that in a way that we can act like we don't already have it, or, I mean, anyway.
It doesn't seem like you should have to FOIA Eagle. I mean, if they have it and it's public information, I'll just give it to you. Shouldn't have to process a FOIA request for it. I mean, they're a government entity, just like,
It's a public facility.
yeah.
It's a public facility, but is it a court document?
I don't think they're in litigation. I mean, maybe they are.
That was my impression when they were saying you weren't a party to this. I was assuming that this had like a court case number and and that's why they wouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, if it's in court, then yeah, it might not be subject to disclosure.
I mean, yeah.
But normally Eagle documents should be.
Mhm. So them telling us no and not just us no, but the developers know, makes me think it must be, or it's likely to be a situation where it is in court.
I think the main thing is to make sure the developers know that we are, and I think they do know that we have been doing things to try to help.
Yeah.
But if we can do more and we continue to do more, I think that all goes, favorably.
For sure. Agreed.
So I did also add to our memo, Kurt had sent me some information on connection fees. And whether or not they were applied to debt payments and, issues surrounding that. So I don't know if you're ready to talk about that.
Yeah, I am, I'll tell you, my own personal experience, I've paid about $25,000 into this water and part of the sewer system already. And if Sun Communities comes in and puts $1 million worth of tap fees on the table, and that's not going toward the bond, I'm not real happy about that. That system was supposed to be funded by connection fees when it was initially conceived.
Right, right.
So I'm looking for a legal basis to, again, when I talk with neighbors, to me, it looks like there's a risk of a lawsuit if somebody's saying you're not managing this properly. The 4.4 mils didn't mean that connection fees were no longer gonna be applied. And in Westchester Farm, you may have another 200 or more connections there. You're talking, that would be 2 million there, 1 million with you're huge sums of money.
And Chelsea's Square is like, what is it, 90 units maybe?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 81 or 84.
Mm-hmm.
So are we legally obligated to take the connection fees, that we have been collecting and putting those towards the bond payment?
Yeah, I mean, that raises a lot of questions I don't know the answer to in terms of what have we done with the connection fees.
Well, we have them and we have them in accounts.
Mm-hmm.
They're just sitting there.
Right.
So,
Well, can I say also since 2012? So when Rod took over as treasurer in 2012, the entire board, was swept out, scorched earth kind of situation. And so I'm not sure if we know exactly prior to 2012, and I think we had talked a little bit about possibility of a forensic audit, but I think what we would know for sure is anything that has come in since Rod's been here. Since 2012, which I don't think are huge sums, but certainly here and there, people connecting. I think what we're looking at would be the first big amount that has come in. But I think tracking those prior to 2012 proves a little more difficult. Not that it's not worth doing or not possible.
Well,
I just want to mention that.
with the previous board prior to 2012, I think those connection fees they were making payments to the county. They just weren't covering it all. And the handwriting was on the wall that it's gonna blow up on you.
mm-hmm. Well, who was your bond counsel? Who did you use, for your financial advisor on that?
It's all done through the county.
No, it was Axe and Eklund or something.
John Axe
Yeah, yeah.
is the financial advisor.
He was, and he was the financial advisor on the recent refunding, and I'm pretty sure he was also on the original.
Yeah, I mean, he's pretty old too, I think.
Yes,
I
he
don't,
didn't come to the meeting, one of his partners did it.
okay. But, he may be, we might want to talk to them about application of the connection fees to the payments. But normally that's what you would do, is pay down. There's a certain period of time that you can't pay down. There's a call period, but now if there's been a refinancing, I don't know if we can, some of those things of how much you can pay down on it and when you can pay down. Typically, there's a call period for at least a few years, where you can't pay, where the investors on the bonds expect their rate of return. So you can't pay it down. But after that, then normally you can just pay it down. And, if you have money up front that you can't pay down, you'll invest it, try to earn some interest on it. And then you can't earn more interest than you're collecting, or paying on the bond, but you collect interest on it and then put it on as soon as you can. So, I mean, that would be normally what you would do, is pay down on any kind of bond payments or the principal amount as soon as you can. So, I mean, I think that's what we would do. I still want to have a discussion with the financial advisor on that to make sure that's part of what their plan was, but that would be the normal plan, would be to do that. And so from that standpoint, you could pay down what's left. I don't think you have a tremendous amount left on your debt.
There's 4 million, but I want to say that when we did the refunding, I think I remember them saying, because it only had 4 years left on it, it was not something that we were going to be able to pay off, because kind of like you said, the investors wanted.
Yeah, there's a call on them.
Return,
Yeah.
right. So I think it was not callable if we refunded, which the board unanimously supported, and we did. But since then, I know we've had conversations with Catherine McClary, the Washtenaw County Treasurer, and a couple people over there when we had our last meeting. And Catherine was saying that we could still make payments on principal. She said it in a couple emails that made me feel like that specific wording was important.
Yeah, that's why I think we have to talk to the financial advisor on it.
Okay.
To make sure that we're not doing something that, we can't do or shouldn't be doing.
Well, currently the county, we're not covering the bond payments that the county has to make. So the county is advancing money to us, and then they're charging interest on that. So.
Yeah, so I mean, at least that should be right, and maybe that's what she's saying, is that we could use it to make the principal payments.
Right.
Right, because right now.
That makes sense.
They were charging a different interest rate for the advance than the bond. But right now, we're not in that situation anymore. The rate we're paying on the bond is the rate we're paying to the county for the advance. So I think she was kind of saying, if you can't pay off the advance, you can still make payments on principal. It's kind of a wash, because the interest is the same.
right.
5,000, we put in, or 5 million, we put in $1 million, it's still 4 million, whether it's the advance or the principal. Since the interest rate is the same, is not as important as it used to be.
Yeah, because the investors are still gonna have to have their rate of return on their investment.
And, you know, we're not making a payment directly to the bond, right? I mean, we're paying the county, and the county's making the bond payment. So if we give the county too much money, they'll continue to pay the bond on the schedule that
Right.
they've agreed to. But it gets us out of the 4.4 mils earlier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I don't, so is that 4.4, has that been fixed? Like that number has always been just 4.4?
Yeah, yeah, that was the vote of the people,
Mm-hmm.
so that was on the ballot.
Because a lot of times, those could go, the amounts can be reduced over time too,
I think
what the millage rate is.
does it depend on the language if it says up to 4.4 mils or?
Yeah, because a lot of times it'll allow you to go up to make the bond payments. But, if it's been refunded or refinanced and you're paying a lower, you might not have to levy as many mills.
Mhm.
But it does depend on the bond language.
Right. Right, and I think you and I talked about that once, and then it was like, wow, how do we dig up that bond language? I mean, probably the county would have it. But the
Mhm.
clerk's office
Is it
would
the
still.
bond?
Oh, they would definitely have it.
Oh,
They
for
have
the
a whole
village,
packet
right,
on
village
all that.
language is what I meant, right, the vote.
Right.
Yeah.
From what we found downstairs, it says 4.4, it does not say up to.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
But you can renegotiate any time with the county on that. You can adjust it. If the county agrees, done deal.
But is it that if we pay, if I'm trying to understand what you're saying, Kurt, if we could still pay more towards this to pay off our portion of it, the county would still pay off per that schedule? So we would take care of our obligation to the county, and then the county would continue that payoff schedule, because they're the one holding that bond. So even if, what I'm hearing, even if it's not callable, because we refinance, we could still pay off our
Right.
obligation to the
I see what
county.
you're saying, yeah.
Right, so that would take care of the callable issue. Jeez, me.
Well, and I think that might be what Catherine McClary was getting at,
Mm-hmm.
too.
Well, how much do you have, do you know how much you have in connection fees right now?
I thought I heard 600,000.
I'd have to look and see what's in that bank account.
And yeah, if we could if we could tell Sun, unfortunately we can't, but if we could, because I couldn't reach agreement with them, on their payment. At first they were just gonna come in and pay the $1 million. But then they wanted other, things put in that agreement that we couldn't agree to. But that money, if we can get this moving, that would be forthcoming and could assist in getting things paid down earlier.
Are you saying 600 million, wait.
600,000.
600,000
Is-
in it, right, where'd you hear that?
I thought in one of the meetings we had,
Oh, okay.
Ryan mentioned that.
Well, and how about like the prepayments from, Trupiano and, we've had people
Right,
paying
right.
in.
Well, all the consent judgments have a schedule, like an exhibit A or B, where the developers needed to continue paying tap fees.
Right.
So all that money's been coming in, from Sylvan.
Yeah, when you
Hills,
do,
from
when you do your audit, it should show those funds.
For example, the Larry Gotcher property, even though nothing ever got built there, he still had to pay tap fees based on the schedule.
Yeah, they've prepaid for a lot of taps.
Yeah, they did, when he sold some of them. Yep.
I know I went down to Grass Lake and made them give me a check for $16,000 for the the medical center that they put along I-94. And that's 16,000 that never went towards the bond. You know, and listening to the sewer committee people, they're saying Grass Lake owes a lot more than that, you know? That they haven't been picking up all their obligations on,
Mm-hmm.
part of the sewer.
Yeah, under our sewer agreement, yep.
You know, so if that's a breach of contract, we should be getting with Grass Lake and say, hey, either pay up or we'll talk about it in court.
Yeah, didn't we make them pay some up already?
I only personally know the check I got for 16,000.
Okay,
I handed them a stack of paper also that said, by the way, here's everything else you owe. And they've just done nothing with it.
When was that?
When I was supervisor,
yeah, I remember something about where we were collecting. But yeah, I mean, if they owe money under the contract, we should definitely be collecting that.
And those are sewer taps.
And then that was the other thing we talked about, so sewer taps, so, well, I guess it would all come in here if it's going to the, but we talked at one time, would sewer taps go to the sewer authority? Or do sewer taps come into Sylvan?
I would argue that they should come to Sylvan for now
Okay.
because we have the debt.
The bond, right?
Yeah, we have debt obligations.
Bonded for both, so.
So the bond is for
Yes.
sewer, I thought there was so there was a special assessment for the lakes for 7 million? And
That's-
then there was the
right,
water
that's a
bond.
different one. That one's paid
Yeah.
off.
It's a
But,
different
but the 4.4 mils is for sewer and water?
Yep.
Got it. Okay,
Yeah.
I don't think I quite read, okay.
There's 113,000 in that account right now.
The 4.4 mils is for water, correct?
It's,
There
the bond
is-
is for water and, it's water and sewer.
Yes.
I believe, water and storm water and,
Okay, so I didn't
Sewer.
quite
Because
understand.
that interceptor, wouldn't that interceptor just about be paid off? The sewer interceptor?
I don't think it's tracked separately. It's all part of that $12.5 million.
Okay, all right.
And so it's not tracked, so I'm curious, what portion of that bond was for the sewer itself? Was that ever delineated?
It talk, in the sewer agreement, it talks about the amount of
oh,
So
okay.
the
8
costs for the sewer, for the interceptor.
Got it.
For the
Okay.
interceptor, okay.
But it sounds like we're just making a single, you know, we're responsible for paying single payment over to the county
Right. But
of
that-
X dollars.
That would make sense that any of those fees from Grass Lake would then go, towards that bond. That's what the bond language is.
In Grass Lake, a township anyway, oh, and actually the village came to the last sewer authority meeting and expressed interest in, whatever we were doing, whether we were gonna, you know, dissolve, that's fine, or if we were going to continue on and redo the articles, they would be willing to come on, get Lima off. So I just wanted to throw that out there, that they were at the last meeting and
Interesting.
kind of wanting to,
But no
Yeah.
discussion after Kurt presented them with those.
Right, they had a
bills.
change in supervisor
No,
and
okay.
maybe treasurer changed,
yeah.
so they had a big
Could be.
turnover.
Right,
And we had, that's two
Everybody-
supervisors ago for
Right,
us
right.
too, so.
right, that's
I mean, it's part of
challenging.
the, it is challenging, it's part of the
But that's
difficulty of,
Good news, cause they
So-
didn't, they were invited to all those sewer meetings and they never showed,
Okay,
would
yep.
never show up.
yeah, they came to the last one, the village manager and Mr. Lisinski, the township supervisor.
Mhm. Okay.
So the number that I hear Rod say makes me wonder what, cause I feel like that feels pretty low. But I'd have to look and see, like, how many,
And what account is that again, you're referring?
Special sewer account.
Special sewer?
And we have
special
4
sewer.
CDs that were there when I came in 2012.
Okay,
And those 4 CDs total about 175,000 right now.
okay. But it's difficult to know what's coming from tap fees, and those monies come in and they go into the special sewer account, and then that's where you pay the county out of also.
Yep.
The 4.4 goes into special sewer, tap fees go into special sewer, the county gets paid.
Where do rates get paid? So like service rates.
You mean like,
Your water bill.
Yeah, water bill, sewer bill.
that goes to the Water and Sewer Authority, and then they give us the water bill. the water
Okay.
part.
And is that kept set? Because so like rates, and I don't know what makes up your rates, but sometimes rates have built-in debt service in a rate. I don't know if yours do. But also built into rates are repair and maintenance. So all that money that would come in on rates is not just to pay down on debt.
And then
Really, rates only pay down on debt if there's a debt service portion of the rate. Otherwise, the rates should be set aside for operations, maintenance, and repair. Does that make sense?
So right now.
Separate than the connection fees. I agree, connection fees should just be paid over.
Right.
But right now, our rates then they're set up so that a certain portion goes towards the bond and a certain portion goes towards repair.
I don't know.
Our bills, the bills that are paid, there's a built-in factor for maintenance.
But not for the 4.4.
No,
Not for debt.
Yeah, I mean, if there's not a debt service charge on it, then the rates normally would not be used to pay down on the debt
Okay, right,
unless there's a designated debt service on there.
makes sense.
So what happens to the connection fees after the bonds are paid in the future?
Good question.
Well, typically the township, I mean, they're restricted funds for the sewer and water system. So it's gonna, people pay connection fees once the bond's paid off of. Normally it's gonna go to operations. You might say, I mean, you kind of designate where you want that to go. I mean, I would probably put connection fees towards repair and replacement. Because, they're buying into the system. So basically they're paying into the transmission system and so forth. Probably put that money into that.
No legal requirement to pay back the taxpayers that paid for the system?
No, there's not to my knowledge. I mean, it's a very strange thing that you have. I'll say that with I mean, I've not looked into like that agreement, Kurt, that you had attached. I'd like to see that full agreement. I've never seen that.
I hadn't seen that either, and that was something you found here, because I know the county said they couldn't find anything.
No, the county did send me something, but I can't.
Yeah, I'd like to see like the full documents that you sent over, because I'd be interested to look at that. But I mean, it's a very unique situation where you had to go back to the taxpayers to do that. But typically there wouldn't be unless there's something in some agreement somewhere, you wouldn't be going back and repaying the taxpayers out of it.
and if we did something like that, that would be lawsuits flying everywhere from the people that sold their homes and moved out.
Yeah, I mean, it would be very difficult, and I just don't think unless there's something in those agreements, that's not something that would normally be done.
So,
Be-
future connection fees, could they be used to pay back the township, the money that we have to take out of the general fund to help the water and sewer department every year? Every year, we have to put about say 120, 150,000.
I mean, that's probably a more likely payback.
That's just for water, it's not for sewer.
Sorry, yeah, just for water.
Excuse me.
Gesundheit.
But yeah, I mean, you have to be careful on those things, but that might be something that could be repaid. But and ultimately you are going to need funds for repair and replacement. And all that does, the more funds you have available, it just reduces the amount of rates those ratepayers are going to have to pay. But I understand if you paid money out of general fund, everybody in the township paid for that. That you'd be paying yourself back for. That's something that, it makes sense to me, but we want to talk with the auditors, about that
Which.
and make sure they'd sign off on it.
Why are we, yeah.
So like if you
We're
had,
sitting on the tap fees and yet we're giving money to.
yeah,
the
that doesn't
water-
make sense.
Thank you. That doesn't make any sense, that we're giving money to the water system while we're sitting on tap fees that were intended for the water
Right.
system.
Right.
Yeah,
No, that your connection fees should go, and maybe then you don't need to support it out of your general fund,
right. And haven't needed to for as long as however.
right? It could be, it just depends how much, I mean, for a period of time, for sure,
Yeah.
it wasn't working that way, because after 2008, probably nothing was being connected for a period of time.
Right, I'm sure.
But now in, the past few years, you've had connections and like Kurt said, under those agreements, the consent agreements, they were paying special assessments to pay, for their connection fees.
And I have been receiving, when they come in for tap for water and sewer, I have been receiving them separately.
Mm-hmm,
Those
that's
water
good, yep.
taps go back to the water fund that we support.
And that's one thing that our auditors said the last time, is they wanted us to do that, and the Woodhill group that came in wanted us to pool all our cash, but our auditor was.
No, you shouldn't, yeah.
Yeah, they wanted them separate, so that's gonna be easier to track, I think, going forward, cause we are keeping them separate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think it's important to keep them separate.
yeah, me too. All right, does anybody have any other thoughts, questions on that?
Is there anything easy we can do?
Not in Sylvan.
Took the words right out of my mouth, that's exactly what you said.
All right, so we're still in closed session, so that if we're done with closed session, we will move back into open session. And Amanda's
Kurt
noting
will
the time.
move to come out of closed session.
I'll second.
You saying, it's 12:35, or excuse me,
11:35.
11:35? And that was you, Kurt, and
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, so open session, still no public, Board of Trustee member comments? All right,
Move to adjourn.
Rob, do you have anything else?
No, I don't, no, I think that was pretty productive, though.
Yeah, I do too. Thanks for being here, and thanks to all you
Yeah.
guys for being here too. All right, motion to adjourn from Rod.
Kurt will second.
Kurt, thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay. Okay,
All right, thank you.
thank you.
Thanks, Rob.
Bye.
Bye.
I gotta dick around with this camera.
Who's outside?